Hey guys, it's Zerx What If, and welcome to part 4 of What If Yuji Was Like Yoriichi. You guys have been extremely supportive in the comment section with the views and the likes. I just couldn't imagine getting this far this early on. I have already hit 200 subscribers, and this is with only my first What If, so again, I greatly appreciate you all. If you didn't see, I had made a post before I dropped this video. I was just asking if you guys could give me some what if ideas. Let me know what you guys want to hear from me. I'm willing to do research on things I haven't heard before and try to implement it into JJK. And let me know also if you want to hear more than just JJK what ifs. But again, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart, sincerely. But yeah, let's get right into this. Continuing where we left off, Yuji would have been training non-stop. After the devastating loss that he had to Kokushibbo, he couldn't take any more losses. And remembering what Sukuna said when he took over his body, saying that if he were to train hard enough, he could be on par with the King of Curses. So as time would pass, Yuji would train with his other classmen while also training with Gojo from time to time. Yuji during this downtime would also be sent on missions every now and then. Yuji would be pushing himself non-stop. As Megumi and Nobara would be seeing Yuji push himself, they would decide that Yuji might need a break due from all his overtraining. As Megumi and Nobara would try to convince Yuji to go to the movies with them, Yuji declining at first, saying that he just needs to get stronger so that no other life will be taken meaninglessly. This is when Nobara would begin to scream, telling Yuji that he needs to come with him right now. She's tired of him always looking so serious and glum. This would shock Yuji, seeing that she was getting angry on his behalf. Yuji, hearing her, would then agree to going to the movies with them. As the trio would enjoy their day, and the day would be coming to an end, Megumi would get a message saying that they need to meet up with Utahime. Gojo and Utahime would have realized that there had been a mole at Jujutsu High, and they needed to figure out who it was. They had suspected that it was Kokichi, this being Mekamaru, simply due to the process of elimination. Going to try to figure out if it was him or not, they would discover a false hideout that would confirm that Mekamaru was the traitor. In the background, Kokichi would be meeting up with Geto, Mahito, and Kokushibbo. He would have entered a binding vow with Mahito to fix his body in exchange for information. As he had fulfilled his end of the deal, Mahito would begrudgingly heal Kokuichi, with Kokuichi and Mahito deciding to settle their differences right then and there. But just like in the original, the fight would go on with Mekamaru losing. And after that, 10 days later, just after 7 p.m. on October 31st, a curtain would be lowered over Shibuya. It would trap the civilians inside, and they were told that they wouldn't be able to leave until Satoru Gojo arrives. As a team of Jujutsu sorcerers would be placed outside of the curtain, these being the original teams that were in canon. The managers of each team would inform their squads to stand by and take out anything that gets past Gojo once he goes inside, with majority of the sorcerers noting that there were definitely special grade curses waiting inside. As Gojo would arrive where all the civilians were trapped, Gojo would realize that there was another barrier that had trapped non-sorcerers as well. Gojo would keep walking until he reached the atrium below. He gets a vague idea of what the enemies were planning, but he welcomed the challenge. He would descend lower into the subway. This is where he would see Kokushibbo, Mahito, and Dagon. Gojo, scanning Kokushibbo, would realize that this was the guy Yuji was talking about. He would tell the curses that he hopes they're ready to die today, with all of them just getting ready in preparation for Gojo to attack. They only needed to stall time for Kenjaku to be able to open the prison room. Even if they died here, as long as Gojo Satoru was sealed, everything would come to fruition. Meanwhile, Yuji would be assigned to Team Meimei and her younger brother Wiwi. Yuji tells Meimei that he could help Gojo, with Meimei telling him that he'll get the chance. She would receive a call that would take the teams off standby. She would then tell Yuji that they had been assigned to deal with the curtain that had appeared over the station. As Meimei would jump into the station, she would tell Yuji to keep up, surprised that he was right on her heels. This is where one of the assistant managers begins to break down the situation. There were 2 curtains, and Team Meimei must disable the first one before they can head deeper into the station. There were also a swarm of transfigured humans attacking civilians inside. Yuji, hearing this, would realize that patch-faced curse is here, as he would grip his blade tightly. Meimei would then use her crows to scout the station, asking Yuji if he would like to fight one strong curse or a bunch of weak transfigured humans. But before Yuji could answer, she would just tell him not to worry about it and take out the target that was between basement floor 1 and 2. While doing so, she would take care of the transfigured humans. Mei would tell Yuji to be careful, but Yuji tells her that he promises he will never lose again. This is when Yuji would eventually happen upon the grasshopper curse, as he would be eating someone's head. Yuji, seeing that the grasshopper curse had already taken someone's life, wouldn't waste any time at all. Sun breathing, first form, dance. He would cleave the grasshopper curse clean in two, exorcising it immediately. Yuji would then clap his hands and pray for the people that the grasshopper curse had killed, saying that he promises he'll save as many people as he can. As Yuji would finish praying, he would then break the talisman that would lower the curtain. Mei, noticing that the curtain was gone, would tell Uiwi to meet up with Yuji before heading down to the basement's 5th floor. As Team Mei would regroup, she would commend Yuji on his performance, with Yuji saying that there was still a bigger threat at hand, Uiwi just telling him to accept the compliment. Back to where Gojo is, the 3 curses would understand that they had to stall Gojo for at least 20 minutes. Kokushibbo, not wasting any time, would rush in and try to attack Gojo, with Gojo being surprised that a curse would be this bold to take him head on. Gojo would realize that Kokushibbo was using domain amplification, and it was pushing pretty far into his infinity. Them being surrounded by a crowd of people would realize Gojo wouldn't be able to use his full strength as long as these people were around. To cause panic and chaos, Mahito would begin touching other people, turning them into transfigure humans, making everyone scatter. As Kokushibbo and Dagon would see an opening, they would attempt to strike Gojo again, with both of their attacks being stopped by the infinity. Both of the 2 curses would activate their domain amplification. They would both begin to push further into Gojo's infinity. Gojo would back up to the top of the platform, away from the curses, and Kokushibbo would taunt him for running away, asking him why he was running away, as he was seemingly supposed to be the strongest of this era. Gojo quickly clarifies to Kokushibbo that he's not running away. He just thinks it's stupid that the curses think that they can win if this was all that they had. As Gojo would then proceed to remove his blindfold, looking at Dagon and telling him that he's going to die first, since he's the weakest out of all of them. He would openly challenge the cursed spirits to make their next move, reminding Kokushibbo about what he said, telling him that he was the one that said not to run. Would seamlessly teleport in between all 3 of the curses. As all 3 of the curses would attempt to attack Gojo, they would be surprised when Gojo easily dodges and grabs Kokushibbo's arm. Gojo would then flip Kokushibbo over his back, making Mahito and Dagon attack him. He would then proceed to rip off Kokushibbo's arm, using the arm to hit Dagon and send him flying across the station. Dagon, realizing that Gojo had deactivated Limitless, he would make a killing statement towards him. This is when Dagon would deactivate his domain amplification, with Kokushibbo calling him an idiot. Gojo immediately catching on this, he would have baited Dagon into deactivating his domain amplification. He would rush over to Dagon, grabbing their wings, and rip them off. Even after that devastating attack to Dagon, he would still try to counterattack, attempting to wash Gojo away. Using his disaster tides, he would produce a massive wave of water, but it wouldn't do anything to Gojo, simply being caught by his infinity. As Kokushibbo would rush in to try to help the cursed spirit, Dagon would try to sync his attack with him, both of them trying to use domain amplification to neutralize his Limitless, telling them that it's a bad idea because he can simply counter it by strengthening his curse technique, and this octopus just might not be up for the task. He would expand the range of his infinity, targeting Dagon, pinning them against the wall. Kokushibbo, realizing that nothing much could be done right now, would simply back up, with Mahito threatening to kill other people to try to get Gojo's attention, but Gojo just ignores him. Just then, Gojo would crush Dagon against the wall, exorcising him. Gojo Satoru would turn around and ask who's next. As Kokushibbo and Mahito realized that they were 1 down, they decided to focus on hit and run tactics. Going back to where Yuji was, he would find a lone civilian, with the civilian revealing that everyone on the level was turned into monsters and put on a train, saying that they were the only one left because they couldn't fit anyone else on the train anymore. Shortly after, the civilian would then be transfigured in front of Yuji, this angering Yuji even more, with Yuji realizing that Mahito ahead of time had transfigured a bunch of humans and put them on a train, and now that train was being sent straight towards Gojo. As the train arrives to where Gojo is, the transfigured humans spill out and attack the crowd. Mahito would have a sinister smile and ask Gojo what was he about to do. Just then, Kokushibbo would slash the ceiling, causing a bunch more civilians to fall through the roof, creating even more panic. The curses know that Gojo is capable of making cold-hearted decisions, but they don't believe that he'll be able to kill civilians during the calls. But to everyone's surprise, Gojo would use his point 2 domain. It was an all or nothing. Gojo would then proceed to take care of all 1,000 of the transfigured humans. With Gojo being exhausted after killing all 1,000 transfigured humans, the prison realm would then appear behind Gojo. Just as the prison realm opens and Gojo meets its gaze, before he can run, Geto will reveal himself. This would confuse Gojo, allowing him to be captured by the prison realm. This is when Kenjaku will reveal to Gojo who he actually is. Gojo telling him that he should still be scared because there's someone out there that's still strong. He may not be as strong as him, but he'd still be able to kill all these people here. Geto says that he's not worried about Yuji, and they have a plan for the kid. Meanwhile, going back to where Yuji is, a small circular device would have appeared on Yuji's ear. With Yuji being surprised, he would have taken it and nearly crushed it, but this is when Mekamaru would tell him to stop and that they're on the same side. This is when he would begin to tell Yuji that Gojo Satoru has been sealed. This is when Mei would then tell Mekamaru that she has no reason to believe that Gojo had been sealed. He would explain his circumstances and explain how his insurance plan was only set to activate in the event that the sealing had took place. Mei would begrudgingly believe him, with Mekamaru telling her that there are cursed users headed over to eliminate her as they speak. Yuji staring forward would confirm that there were at least 2 enemies incoming and that they were more powerful than the grasshopper curse that he had fought earlier. Mekamaru would then try to devise a plan for them. With Mei being hesitant, she decides to listen. Mekamaru would then ask Mei to clear a path for Yuji so that he could return to Shibuya and inform everyone of the sealing. As across Shibuya, more curtains would appear. Now, transfigured humans were attacking the civilians trapped inside of them. This is when Team Zenin would be taken off standby. They would be ordered to save the civilians that were trapped inside of the barrier, with Nanami being concerned that there was an appearance of new curtains. They were unsure of what had happened to Gojo, and decided to read the situation as they entered the battlefield. Going back to Yuji, Mekamaru would then begin to explain the situation to Yuji, telling him about Gojo and revealing his location. Seeing as one of his communication devices were already at Gojo's location, but it was destroyed by Mahito. Yuji telling Mekamaru that he understands the situation would enter a curtain that were trapping civilians in the city. Entering the curtain, he would see multiple transfigured humans trying to attack the bystanders. This is when Yuji would not waste any time at all. Gripping his blade as tightly as he can, he would rush in and take out as many transfigured humans as he could. This is when Yuji would then proceed to traverse around the city as fast as he could, trying to find Megumi and the others, taking out any transfigured humans that he sees along the way. As he would find Nanami's group, he would then converge with them, telling them that Gojo Satoru had been sealed. Nanami takes this very seriously and immediately tells them that they need to change courses. Gojo was a huge asset on their team, and with him being sealed, things might have just taken a left turn. In the background, Choso and Eso would be trying to find Yuji to tell him more about Kenjaku's plan. As long as they made it to Yuji without dying, they'd be able to tell him vital information. As Team Nanami would regroup, Mekamaru would try to devise a plan for all of them. Mekamaru would tell the team that they need to disperse the barrier so Yuji could go to where Gojo was, seeing as he was the only one here that was probably capable of taking on all the other curses. But before they would be able to do that, they would need to take down the curtain. They would devise a plan, agreeing that the top of the tower is probably the most obvious spot in the city, and tells them all to look for stakes that are wrapped in talisman that serve as the base for the curtain. This is when Yuji would ask Megumi to take him with them so they could take care of the situation faster. Megumi would then summon Nue to scale the tower to try to surprise the curse users. As they get up there, they would devise a plan where Megumi would try to snag all 3 of the curse users at once, so either Ino or Yuji could go in and destroy the stakes wrapped in talisman. As they would catch the curse users off guard, Megumi would swoop in with Nue, also summoning Great Serpent to help him move the cursed users. With Awasaka, one of the cursed users, being hit by Nue and being tossed off the tower, the other 2, they would dodge Nue, but still get hit by Great Snake. They wouldn't be tossed off the skyscraper, but would have taken damage. This is when the elderly female curse user would tell her grandson to prepare himself. Yuji would ask Ino if he needs help taking care of these 2, with Ino telling him to go help Megumi just in case things got dire. This is when Yuji would jump straight off the skyscraper. As Megumi already had eyes on Awasaka's body, something wouldn't be right. Even if he had all the curse reinforcement in the world, his body was way too clean from the impact. Megumi would demand that he gets up, and he eventually does, with Awasaka going on his little rant, talking about how the young have no pity for the elderly. As both Megumi and Awasaka would begin to start their fight, Yuji would fall in between both of them. Yuji would immediately close in on Awasaka, striking him as hard as he could, with Megumi also landing his own attacks, throwing in Nue and Divine Dog. The curse user would take the attacks head on, but something just wasn't right. Despite everything that they had thrown at him, Awasaka would just come right back up. Awasaka would try to attack Yuji with a knife, Yuji simply parrying it and countering it with his own attack, would slam into him with another strike. This is when Megumi would follow up with one of his toads, slamming Awasaka into an overpass. Despite all of this, the cursed user just remained to seem undamaged, confusing both Megumi and Yuji. Yuji knew he was a lot faster and stronger than this guy, but something just wasn't right. As Megumi would land another blow on Awasaka, he would then begin to question about what his technique is. He knows that Awasaka's curse technique can't be something as overpowered as damage nullification. An idea pops in Megumi's head, and he decides to test out an hypothesis. Megumi would activate Rabbit Escape, summoning a large swarm of hares. As Awasaka would begin to block the rabbits, Megumi would notice something, telling Yuji, back to where Ino was on the roof. He would realize that the old lady had performed a seance, transforming her grandson. Even though he knew the old lady had transformed her grandson, he would switch his focus onto the grandson, because he could tell from a single glance that whoever her grandson transformed to was extremely powerful. Ino would attempt to summon one of his Shikigami, but Toji would immediately dash behind him. And before Ino could turn around, Toji would land a devastating blow to his chin, and then pummel Ino with rapid fire punches. Down below on the ground floor, Megumi, having figured out Awasaka's technique, he would inform Yuji of what they need to do. Yuji, hearing this, simply wouldn't waste any time. He would dash forward, but instead of slashing with his full strength this time, he would simply lightly tap Awasaka 5 times. As Awasaka would be tapped, he would be blown back by the recoil, knocking Awasaka out immediately with his own technique. Just as they would finish up the fight with Awasaka, they would see Ino falling from the roof of the skyscraper. Yuji, being the first to notice, would immediately jump up and catch him. Megumi, noting that despite knowing that Yuji was incredibly strong, he didn't know he could jump that high. Yuji would try to ask Ino what had happened. However, Ino would still be unconscious. Just then, Toji would have landed directly next to Megumi and Yuji. Not even within a single breath, Toji would have singled in on Yuji. This is when Yuji would tell Megumi that he needs to take Ino and take him to Shoko, telling Megumi that he'll regroup with him after he comes back from Shoko. Megumi, having full faith in Yuji, will tell him not to do anything stupid. Megumi would then grab Ino and proceed to head towards Shoko. As the battle would begin between Yuji and Toji, it wouldn't be much of a fight for Yuji. Yuji would take this fight seriously, seeing that he had hurt one of his fellow Jujutsu sorcerers. Yuji, without wasting any time, would reluctantly kill Toji, seeing as if he was to be let free and do whatever he wanted, he would probably cause major chaos, killing people indiscriminately. Even though Yuji knew it was the right thing to do, he still couldn't help but think, does killing him make me as bad as the other people who kill? Shaking this thought out of his head, he would then proceed to go down into the station where Gojo was being kept. As Yuji would be continuing throughout the streets, he would take out as many transfigured humans as he can. With every transfigured human that Yuji had taken out, he would only become more and more enraged. These were people who had once lived lives just like him. Their lives had been taken from them for no reason. There was no justification in what was being done to these people, and Yuji simply couldn't accept it. Yuji would then tell himself that the second he saw Mahito, he would kill him right then and there. As Yuji would fall into the station, Choso would be at the bottom of the stairs. He had been walking around with Eso, trying to find out where Yuji was. As Yuji would make eye contact with the curse, Yuji would immediately draw his sword. He remembered the curse from the last time he had fought Kokushibbo. He wasn't going to waste his time with these curses. As Yuji would be about to attack Choso, Choso would drop to his knees and plead to Yuji. This would leave Yuji absolutely confused. Choso would then explain to Yuji about their encounter and what had happened between him and Yuji. He would tell Yuji that when Kokushibbo stabbed him through the chest, he would have experienced Yuji's death, and he was only able to do that with his blood relative siblings, telling Yuji that he believes that he is his younger brother, and as an older brother, it's his duty to protect him and make sure he's okay. Yuji would simply stare at Choso, trying to get a read on the curse. Seeing that the curse wasn't actually trying to attack him, and it hadn't killed anyone to his knowledge, he would tell Choso that he believes him. However, he will still be on guard. This is when Choso would begin to explain to Yuji about Kenjaku's plan and what they plan on doing. He would tell Yuji that as of right now, Gojo Satoru had been sealed. However, they were stuck on the bottom floor of the station. The prison realm that they had captured Gojo in had fell to the floor with immense weight and had been stuck there for a while. He would tell Yuji that he could lead him down there. He just wanted to help Yuji in any way that he could, seeing that he was his older brother. Yuji would then agree to Choso helping him, telling Choso to lead the way to where Gojo was. Elsewhere, where Gojo had been sealed, Kenjaku would have told Kokushibbo and Mahito that they were the only ones left alive. He would tell them that they probably need to stick together, seeing as Yuji would probably be down there in no time soon. Mahito would then sigh, talking about how bored he was and he wanted to do something. Kenjaku would tell Mahito that he could probably move around since Yuji was heading this way, actually agreeing with Mahito and telling him that he should cause more chaos, reminding both Kokushibbo and Mahito that he still has another trick up his sleeve, saying if anything were to happen, he'll activate that guy. Kokushibbo would then smile and tell Kenjaku that he'll probably stay down here with him just in case Yuji does come, with Kenjaku smiling and telling him that he appreciates that, knowing that he wouldn't be able to beat Yuji one-on-one. He could also tell Kokushibbo that he could try to kill Yuji, as they had 2 more fingers. They could feed Yuji the fingers, activating Sukuna once more. As they would finish up their banter, Mahito would leave the station, telling both of them not to die, laughing on his way out of the station. Mahito, still wanting to break Yuji's soul as much as he could, would attempt to find as many Jujutsu sorcerers as he could and kill them. This is when Yuji, Choso, and Isso would appear before Kenjaku and Kokushibbo. Kenjaku would start to congratulate Yuji. He would tell Yuji about how proud he is of him, with Yuji being annoyed, asking him what the hell is he talking about. This is when Choso would begin to explain to Yuji, telling him that including him and Kechizu, they have 6 other brothers, telling him about their mother, about how there was a man who mixed his blood in between all of it, that being the man that's standing in front of them right now. Kenjaku would only smile, saying that he was so happy that the family was finally getting together. Kokushibbo would then butt in, saying that he didn't want to interrupt the family reunion. However, he cannot allow Yuji to get in their way. He will kill Yuji and release Sukuna again. This is when a mouth on Yuji's cheek would then open up. It would be Sukuna. He would then proceed to make a deal with Kokushibbo. He would tell Kokushibbo that if he could kill the brat right here and now and allow them to switch with each other, he would kill all of the Jujutsu sorcerers that were present, allowing their plan to not be interrupted. This is when Kokushibbo would then draw his blade, grinning ear to ear. He would tell Yuji that he had better be ready, as this would be their final battle, the one that would decide the fate of everything to come. It's either him or Yuji today. This is when Kenjaku would look at Choso and ask him what he's going to do now. Choso would be pissed, seeing as Kenjaku would try to pin Choso onto his brother. He would tell Kenjaku, as Yuji's older brother, he would kill him, with Eso being in the background doubling for support for Choso. This is when the battle would begin. Choso and Eso versus Kenjaku, and Yuji versus Kokushibbo. Kokushibbo would immediately activate his curse technique, forming 2 other pairs of eyes, while causing his sword to grow in size and become a grotesque, flesh-looking sword. Yuji would grip his blade as tightly as he could, turning the blade a bright red. He would grip the blade way tighter than he had ever done before. Both of them would clash. Kokushibbo would be surprised, since the last time he and Yuji had fought it out, he was able to easily outmaneuver Yuji, taking him out before he even had the chance to do anything. But this time, it was completely different. Yuji seemed to be toe-to-toe with Kokushibbo, neither of the two letting each other get the advantage on one another. Each swing of Kokushibbo's blade would release small crescent moons. Yuji would be able to tank these small blades, but he knew over time eventually it'd be a problem. But the same thing went for Kokushibbo. As Yuji would swing, the heat off his blade would be immense. Kokushibbo could not imagine getting stabbed by Yuji's blade, so he simply wouldn't allow himself to be hit. They would both just continue dodging and parrying one another. The battle between the two swordsmen would be so intense, Kenjaku would be thinking about moving his fight outside of the station, but he knew he had to stay inside due to the fact that whoever won this fight would receive the prison realm. Yuji and Kokushibbo would continue trading blows back and forth. Every time Kokushibbo would use a breathing form, Yuji would follow with his own breathing style and suit. Kenjaku would then yell at Kokushibbo to take the fight outside. He'd be able to take care of these two cursed spirits. This is when Kokushibbo would force Yuji to head outside, using his breathing styles, pushing him outside of the station. Yuji would be concerned about Choso. However, he needed to focus on the battle at hand. Again, the two would clash. This is when Kokushibbo would use his 8th form. Yuji would then begin to back up, not wanting to be hit by the miniature crescent slashes. Kokushibbo just wouldn't let up though. After that, he would use his 7th form, attempting to attack Yuji from range. Yuji would dodge the attack. This is when Yuji would use Fire Wheel, getting behind Kokushibbo and slashing him. As Kokushibbo's torso would be violently split open, he would smile and turn around, screaming Yuji's name. Kokushibbo would begin to start using forms indiscriminately. He didn't care what form it was, he didn't care what he destroyed. He wanted Yuji to die here and now. As their fight would be sprung out all across Shibuya, Yuji would simply dodge and attack whenever he could, landing multiple hits, but none fatal enough to end the battle. With Kokushibbo attacking indiscriminately like he was, Yuji would begin to notice that the people around the city were dying due to Kokushibbo's recklessness. Every slash that Kokushibbo has sent towards Yuji would be doing an immense amount of collateral damage. The people around Yuji were dying, and he couldn't help them, he couldn't save them. This would begin to piss Yuji off even more. He's already allowed so many deaths by allowing Mahito to live. And right now, even more people are dying simply because he's not strong enough to end the battle right now. The more lives that Kokushibbo took from their fight, Yuji would only become even more upset that he couldn't do anything to save the lives that were being taken right now. This is when Yuji would attempt to use his 13th form, but again, Kokushibbo would either dodge or block his attacks. Yuji would then think to himself, he needs to try what he tried last time against Kokushibbo. He needs to land another Black Flash. He knows it could do a significant amount of damage to Kokushibbo, and maybe that would allow him to finish this fight. Yuji would then rush in. He would realize that he needs to create an opening in order to land this Black Flash on Kokushibbo. Yuji would begin focus on his breathing, making sure his breaths were controlled. He would stare up at Kokushibbo, watching each one of his limbs move, trying to figure out the best course of action. This is when Kokushibbo would come in, swinging his arms down. Yuji would step back and proceed to swing upwards. Kokushibbo would parry the attack as he would try to go in for another attack. Kokushibbo would slash horizontally at Yuji again. However, this time Yuji could read it easily. He would sidestep the attack, allowing him to kick Kokushibbo in the gut. Groaning in pain, Kokushibbo would gather himself, swinging his blade vertically again. Yuji would deflect the attack, followed by another kick to the face. Kokushibbo would be blown back by the kick. Kokushibbo would be trying to regain his composure. Yuji would already be in front of him. Kokushibbo, without any regard of form, would begin to swing again. Him and Yuji would clash blades. However, the force of the clash would make both of their swords shatter. This is when Kokushibbo would smile, scream at Yuji, telling him that this was the battle he was promised. Yuji would not care about anything Kokushibbo had to say. He would then throw the hilt of his sword at Kokushibbo, also rushing in with the hilt itself. As the hilt of the blade would reach Kokushibbo, he would smack it out the way. The second Kokushibbo would smack the hilt out of the way, Yuji would be coming in with an overhead kick. Kokushibbo, just barely seeing it, would block the attack, going in for a punch of his own. Yuji would then use his leg that was on top of Kokushibbo to push off of him, landing back on his feet, rushing back at Kokushibbo. Yuji would then go in with a punch. Kokushibbo would duck under it. He would try to hit Yuji with an uppercut, but Yuji would simply backstep, going in for another attack of his own. He would feint his attack, causing Kokushibbo to block. Yuji would then remember how Sukuna used his body and his breathing, allowing him to use his techniques without needing a weapon. As Yuji would breathe in, he would strike Kokushibbo in the lower stomach, causing Kokushibbo to be winded by the attack and being blown back into a wall. Kokushibbo would immediately get up and charge back at Yuji. At the same time, both Yuji and Kokushibbo would begin to throw left hands at the body level, with both of them taking the attacks head on. Kokushibbo would try to follow up with a right uppercut, but Yuji would dodge out of the way. As Kokushibbo would try to launch another attack, Yuji would use his technique, crashing Kokushibbo through a building. Just before Kokushibbo would regain his footing, Yuji would be right on his heel, Kokushibbo would jump away, regaining his footing before dashing back at Yuji. He would then slash at the air with his hand, sending miniature crescent moon-shaped blades towards Yuji. Yuji, seeing the blades, would simply dodge, trying to close the distance between him and Kokushibbo. As Yuji closes in, he would throw a right hook, but Kokushibbo would duck underneath it. But before Kokushibbo could counterattack, Yuji was already sending a knee towards him, with Kokushibbo just barely being able to dodge it. They would re-engage in hand-to-hand combat. Kokushibbo would then parry one of Yuji's attacks, grabbing his leg and countering with an attack of his own. Yuji would be able to block the attack, but just as he was about to go in with an attack of his own, he'd be hit in the chest by Kokushibbo. Yuji, catching himself immediately, would then headbutt Kokushibbo, catching him off guard. Taking advantage of the situation, Yuji would then capitalize with several rapid jabs onto Kokushibbo's chest, grabbing him by his cloth and throwing him. Yuji would then rush back onto Kokushibbo, grabbing him and dragging him across a building, breaking apart the walls, tossing him, trying to throw him off balance. But Kokushibbo would catch himself. Inside of Kokushibbo's head, he would be cursing himself, because not only did he realize Sukuna was right, he didn't believe that he'd be the victor of today. He thought the kid was only prominent in swordplay. However, it would seem as if Yuji had been doing this for years. His hand-to-hand combat skills were off the charts. Yuji, realizing Kokushibbo was distracted, would capitalize on this moment. He would leap towards Kokushibbo. Kokushibbo attempting to kick Yuji. Yuji would grab Kokushibbo's kick while throwing in a counter elbow. Being dazed by the attack, Yuji would then again send a kick towards Kokushibbo's ribs, making him fly. As Kokushibbo would slam into another wall, Yuji would already be there in front of him, taking a deep breath. As Yuji would throw his punch, the world around him distorts, with Yuji being able to land a powerful black flash onto Kokushibbo. This would cause Kokushibbo to cough up blood, with him cursing, saying that he should not have taken that hit. However, Yuji just would not give up. He would pummel Kokushibbo's face with a 3-hit combo, grabbing his arm and slamming him into the ground once more. Yuji would then throw a kick down, with Kokushibbo dodging out of the way. He would attempt to throw more crescent moon slashes at Yuji, but Yuji would just dodge them, closing the gap in between them immediately. Kokushibbo would then attempt to grab Yuji. However, Yuji would duck under his arms, throwing another punch at Kokushibbo's stomach, with Yuji hitting yet another black flash. With that punch, Kokushibbo would have been sent flying. He would crash into another wall. Kokushibbo would try to focus on using reverse curse technique to heal himself. However, Yuji just would not let him get any type of breathing room. Screaming Yuji's name, he would try to go in for an attack of his own. But after landing his second black flash, Yuji would be completely in the zone. Everything seemed as if it was going in slow motion for Yuji. He felt like he was on top of the world. He would duck around Kokushibbo's attack, getting behind him, following up with yet another black flash. After that attack, Kokushibbo just couldn't do it anymore. He had given it his all. He had tried his hardest, but after taking those 3 devastating hits, there was nothing he could do. With Kokushibbo on the ground, Yuji would walk over to him. Yuji would tell him, "My strength seems to be enough." Kokushibbo would laugh, Yuji asking him if he had any last words. He would tell Yuji that he will simply die with his ideals, and that mark on his forehead would curse him one day. Yuji would then activate his technique, piercing Kokushibbo straight through the chest. As Yuji would look up to the sky, he would take a deep breath. And I believe that's where I'm going to end off part 4. I want to thank all of you. You guys are insane. I hit over 300 subs already, and I could be more grateful. I don't know what to say, honestly. You guys are amazing, and thank you so much for the support. I love all of you already. But yeah, thank you for listening, and peace.